Hey, it's Colleen.
Hi, it's Kate.
And it's Megan.
And we're the
Three Scheme Queens. Join us as we discuss popular hoaxes and give you our comedic take on what is fact and what is fiction. If you have a sense of humor and an open mind, come take this journey with us.
We'll tell you what we think, and we'll try to prove it to you.
Is this thing on?
Hey, guys.
What's poppin'?
Welcome back.
Just a reminder, guys, don't forget to check out our Facebook and Instagram pages at 3 Scheme Queens. That's the number 3 Scheme Queens, all one word. We're also on Reddit, same username. If you want to check out our website, go to 3schemequeens.com and you can find links to our social media accounts, our Buzzsprout page, all of our episodes, additional content, our contact page, and our discussion board where you can engage with us and share any updates about the topics that we have discussed. Let us know how we're doing and what you want to hear next. There are also opportunities to financially support us. There are links to buy us a cup of coffee, links to our recently updated merch store, and affiliate links. And as always, if you choose not to financially support us, we appreciate the follows, the downloads, the listens, the likes.
Yeah, and if you guys don't mind, after this podcast is done, just go ahead and scroll down to the bottom. Leave us a 5-star review, please. It just helps us get our name out there and sort of boost our listenership. So yeah, or if you feel so led, give us a comment.
Yeah, little love letter.
Mm-hmm. We love a love letter.
I do.
Let's also give a shout out to Jay in Allentown, PA.
Thank you.
Yes, Jay bought us each a cup of coffee. Thanks so much for the support.
Love you, Queen.
She put in a request to hear about Hitler being alive and well in South America.
Oh, we will definitely do that for her.
Hey, girl, it's already on the list.
So is it time for our
drink check?
Drink check. Okay, Colleen, what are you drinking?
One of the viral Sleepy Girl mocktails.
Ooh.
A bit of tart cherry juice. Kate made it. What'd you put in it, Kate?
I put a little tart cherry juice. I guess it can't really be called the Sleepy Girl mocktail because it doesn't have the magnesium powder in it. But it's tart cherry juice and sparkling grapefruit or sparkling water that's grapefruit flavored.
Yeah, it's slap.
So it's pretty good. I'm also drinking that.
And you guys mixed these up in anticipation of recording, so you're not going to fall asleep?
Yeah, we won't.
Well, it depends on the conversation.
Ooh. Bourbon Boy made me an old-fashioned.
Oh.
I didn't watch him make it. Do we know what bourbon he put in here, Kate?
I actually don't. I didn't watch it make it either.
Okay, but it is delicious. He even garnished with a nice ice ball and a little cherry. I will say he was slacking. He was out of orange peels. Boo.
Boo.
Boo. But it actually is probably one of the tastiest.
Really
makes the best hot toddies, and he was going to make one, and I was like, you know what? Let's do something different.
Yeah,
and I would say he knocked it out of the ballpark. So thanks, Bourbon Boy.
Yeah, thanks, Bourbon Boy.
You're the best, Bourbon Boy.
All right. So before you get into it, we will give you a brief summary. But again, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, go back and listen. We had a lot of information last week on the disappearance of Malaysian flight MH370. And today we're just going to get into the theories that are out there and what we each think happened. So again, give a listen to the summary. Here we go. On March 8th, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 took off in the early hours of the morning as the red-eye flight from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia with an intended destination of Beijing, China. There were 227 passengers on board with 12 crew members. The pilot command, 53-year-old Captain Zaharie Shah, was performing a final instructional flight for 27-year-old co-pilot, First Officer Fariq Hamid. And the flight was initially uneventful at a cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. The flight was leaving Malaysian Air Space and was instructed to transfer to the Air Traffic Control Tower in Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam. At 1:19, Captain Shah radioed the air traffic controllers in Malaysia, "Good night, Malaysian 370. That was the last verbal contact with anyone on the plane.
Boom, boom, boom.
Approximately 103 seconds later, the aircraft went dark and vanished from all radar screens in Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok, and Ho Chi Minh City.
Oh my gosh.
There were 2 transponders on board the plane. So to disappear, both transponders would need to cease functioning either by catastrophic failure or by manual override by someone on the plane. It was over 20 minutes before anyone noted the plane was missing. It did not arrive for its 6:30 a.m. ETA and only had enough fuel to fly until about 8:15 a.m. The most expensive search and rescue operation in aviation history was initiated. To this day, we do not know where the airplane is or what happened to the 239 souls on board. An extensive safety report was released, which did not answer many questions and did have inconclusive findings. They denied suspecting any crew was involved and reported that air traffic controllers were delayed in noting the missing plane. Theories vary from a hijacking or suicide mission to a military operation, and a plethora of questions still exist. One thing is for sure. Evidence of shoddy investigative work and potential cover-ups abound. What really happened to MH370 in the early mornings of March 8th, 2014?
So, as a reminder, we had this disappearance in 2014, and a year goes by and we have not found the plane.
Right. No one knows what happened. And so that's kind of when the conspiracy theories start coming.
Right, of course.
So we talked about the pilot theory, which was one of Colleen's theories.
Right. She had like a combination theory. Remind us of your theory, Colleen.
So my first thought was that it was more of a suicidal situation. And then now, after hearing more of the information, I think it was a purposeful suicide situation where he felt like he had to crash the plane for something. Like maybe he knew the plane was carrying something, or that it was a mission kind of situation.
Okay, well, we'll talk about the pilot theory. I mentioned last week about the questions surrounding the status of his marriage.
Oh, yeah.
But what I didn't mention is that he was a pretty vocal political guy. As I said, he had quite a social media presence, and he followed the leader of this opposition party who had actually been tried and sentenced the date prior for sodomy. And there were some reports that Captain Shah might have actually been in the courtroom for this verdict reading. So people theorize the motivation here could have been political.
Wait, sentenced for sodomy? Like, what is this? Is this like 1500s?
Yeah, I know the definition of sodomy, but I thought in court cases it usually referenced like non-consensual acts of sodomy. So it was like an assault situation. You know what? We have a friend of the pod, Emily, who works in the court system with sexual offenders, and I'm going to ask her. So stand by. As of October 1st, 2023, there are 12 U.S. states with statutes criminalizing consensual sodomy. But I confirmed, like, I know, we have all these like weird laws that are on the books from like forever ago.
Right.
But I confirmed that like no one actually gets charged anymore unless it's an assault. And she agreed. It's technically illegal, even if consensual, but nobody is ever charged on it unless it's non-consensual.
But this was in Malaysia, his court case.
Yeah,
obviously. So yeah, I don't know what their rules are.
And I don't know if they have like homophobia there or whatever. Yeah, you're right.
Okay. The update is, I did a little Google search here. The political leader was apparently guilty of sodomizing a male aide.
Well, do we know if that was with or without his consent?
This article doesn't say so. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe opinions and laws are different in Malaysia. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, anyway, back on track. Thank you for that legal consult, Emily. The reason I have kind of a hard time assuming that this is like politically driven on his part is that there was no note, there was no message. Like you would think the purpose, if you wanted to die a martyr, right? Like he needs to say what he's dying for. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I have a hard time just believing this was like politically driven since we never found a message. And there was really no evidence in his personal life of him being an extremist. I mean, he posted political stuff like everyone.
I mean, not like us.
Yeah, no. We don't post political.
No, we don't. But but we all have friends who do, right?
Yes. Right.
Yeah. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're like they're going to kill all these people. I don't know. I just don't buy that theory, but some people do.
But you said all the other Malaysian aircrew members who worked with him like didn't believe he was involved, or?
Yeah, there was also some other crazy theories, like maybe there was a UFO.
Oh.
Maybe it was stuck in a black hole, like sucked into a black hole. It could be somewhere in the Cambodian jungle.
Wait a second.
The Americans did it.
Well, nah.
I don't like that theory. I think the Russians did it.
Not the Americans.
Ooh, yeah. All of that. That's a theory.
I also like the black hole theory. That's fun.
Yeah. There's also a time travel theory for you, Kate.
Oh my, give it to me. Loki? Like, did it go into the time tunnel?
It always goes back to Marvel.
Yeah,
No, no more Loki.
I don't know about that. But the pilot theory, we'll get to the pilot theory first. So again, motivation for this would be potentially protesting the incarceration of that opposition leader that he had supported the day prior. So people think he might have wanted to make a statement. Again, I don't think it's much of a statement if you don't give your motivation. And I guess that theory kind of strengthened with that 22-minute holding pattern that came out a few years ago, because perhaps he was talking to somebody, corresponding with somebody, and he was giving some kind of message.
The government, perhaps?
And they just like covered it up and didn't tell us. Mm-hmm.
That checks out.
Yeah, likely story. Yeah, that definitely makes sense, especially now that the Prime Minister of Australia was like, yeah, it was a murder-suicide, like he knew.
Also, as Captain Fred pointed out, it is not in the airline's best interest to let people know they had a crazy pilot working for them, particularly one who would was one of their top pilots. And Malaysian Airlines is pretty critical to the Malaysian economy. I read that they're pretty proud of their airline.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. They wouldn't they would want to cover it up and not have the negative connotation associated with it.
Yeah. So if we believe the pilot theory, regardless of whether his motivation was suicide or politics or whatever, the theory goes that, he says goodnight to the air traffic controllers in Malaysia, and he's supposed to transfer over to Ho Chi Minh air traffic control. And at that point, he says to his co-pilot, hey, do you want to go grab us some coffee?
Yeah, just, hey, man, go get us some coffee. Help us get us through this overnight flight.
Right. Or maybe he goes to the bathroom. Regardless, the co-pilot gets up, leaves the cockpit, and the pilot locks him out. And we all know post 9/11, there's a lot of security of the cockpit door. So once you're out of the cockpit, you have to be let back in. There's an override code, and if that code is not acknowledged within 30 seconds, then the door is going to open. So this is a backup plan. So I guess if the pilot is unconscious and there's no one in the cockpit, you can plug in this override code, and if he doesn't block your override within 30 seconds, then the door will open and you can go in. But for the most part, if he's conscious, he doesn't want you to come in, he can keep you out of the cockpit. So now he has control of the plane, and at that point, Shah took the opportunity to turn off all of his radar and transponders.
Oh, and then he chose that spot because he knew it was, quote, no man's land or whatever, and that would buy him more time.
Oh, yeah.
Notice.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that would make sense if he was planning this.
Yeah.
And we talked about how the transponders going off would have had to either be a catastrophic event or manually done.
Yeah.
And then the SATCOM got turned off.
Okay.
And one thing that points to this being potentially manually done is that to turn off the SATCOM, you have to turn off the generator. The generator is controlled by a knob that has multiple settings. And if it was a catastrophic event, it would have just gone from on to off. But it didn't. It went very quickly through a series of other options indicating that it was manually turned off, the knob was turned off past multiple settings. And by turning off the generator, he cuts off all SATCOMs because, again, the SATCOM was kind of the second thing that they came out and used to track a little bit more of the flight path. Mm-hmm. This is also how I told you it would prevent passengers from being able to make phone calls or send text messages.
Oh my gosh, that's terrifying.
The theory is out there that he depressurized the cabin because... Okay, this is going to stress you out.
No. No.
So when the little yellow face masks come out of the ceiling from a depressurization,
yeah.
First of all, we understand depressurization, right?
Right.
Okay. So when these yellow masks come out, it buys you about 10 minutes of time, and that is it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I knew that wasn't a life support situation.
The goal is to give you 10 minutes for this plane to get down to a lower altitude where you don't need the supplemental oxygen.
Right. Oh, okay.
But the crew has tanks that will last them more 45 minutes to an hour, and then the pilots have their own tanks. And if there's only one pilot, they have 27 hours worth of oxygen. So I guess if there's two pilots, it's almost 14 hours. Right. So one of the theories is that he depressurizes the cabin, he's got his oxygen supply, and he just has to wait for everyone else to kind of lose consciousness.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Because if you don't put on your oxygen, you're going to lose consciousness within seconds at 35,000 feet.
Right.
But you'll just kind of go to sleep. So they think he opened this outflow valve, which would cause a sudden pressure change. And then within 45 minutes, he knows that everyone on the plane will be dead.
Jesus.
Oh my gosh, that's awful. It's they're suffocating, but they don't know it, right?
Yeah, it would be cool. Yeah, I think it's probably not an unpleasant way to go, but I think you get hypoxic and delirious and kind of just go to sleep. And we do know he made that aggressive U-turn. We know that could not have been done by autopilot. The other thing that makes this theory interesting is that he had his oxygen supply topped off that day.
Oh. Wait, he ask them to do that?
I don't know. I don't know whether he requested that or whether that was routine, but they did say right before the flight, they topped off that tank.
That's
crazy.
Yeah, that's suspicious.
Yeah. So he had a full 27 hours of oxygen from the cockpit.
If that's true, then it's like premeditated, then that's disgusting.
That's kind of why I have a hard time with this theory, because it's one thing to be suicidal, but it's like a whole other thing to, kill 300 people.
Right. Like, let's take down hundreds of people at the time.
Yeah, there was like a 2-year-old on board. I don't know. The other part of the story is that he did have this flight simulator at home.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty early on, the American FBI and the American CIA are like investigating. And they take this flight simulator from his house and study it. And they find this path that looks to be the same route as we think this plane took. Initially, that information is not released. 2.5 years go by, and then there's this leak. Like, oh yeah, the path is the same. But I guess it turns out that it's not really accurate, that it's more like this simulator just took kind of like averaged some different routes that he had, practiced in the past and kind of plotted it out. So it looks sort of like the flight course, but not necessarily like he did one consecutive flight that was the exact flight course. And it's not really perfect. It's just kind of a mismatch of these flights.
I just love that it was like the American FBI and the American CIA.
Yeah, so I think
I'm like, of course they're involved.
Yeah,
a little suspicious.
Well, and that's I think why we'll talk about some theories that maybe the Americans were involved. But yeah, so again, this flight simulation that was released is kind of just a mishmash of flights that he had simulated, not necessarily one flight. So the Malaysians, when this information leaked and people were outraged, like, oh my gosh, he had this flight path on his flight simulator. They're like, no, it's not true. We don't have any evidence that he practiced this route.
Crazy.
Yeah, but that is something that people are like, well, that's super sketchy. When you look at the images which they released, the simulated route does look kind of similar to the predicted flight path. But again, probably not accurate. But also, like, why the odd release of the information? Like, they didn't say anything. And then it kind of got leaked, and then they kind of like, well, yeah, but like, don't believe that information. So are they covering something up?
Yeah.
Or were they just thinking like, if we release this data, then the public is going to misinterpret it?
Yeah.
So that's why we're going to withhold it.
Don't be suspicious.
Yeah, I don't know what that's about.
Let's not give the public all of the facts because they can't handle all the facts.
They're not smart enough to
We're going
understand.
to withhold information.
Yeah. All right. There is a story about a co-pilot in an Ethiopian airline who hijacked a plane in 2014. And he waited for the captain to go to the bathroom and then locked him out. And he was able to divert to Switzerland to seek asylum. So this has happened before where like one pilot locks the other pilot out of the cockpit and hijacks the plane. And if you do believe this theory, then again, remember, he had to turn the generator off to shut the SATCOM off.
Right.
But he can't just fly for 6 hours without the generator on because the plane's going to overheat. So at some point, he had to turn it back on. And we do know that at some point, the SATCOM came back on. And so, that could potentially explain that. And so maybe he just wanted to disappear. He turns off his generator, let some time go on, and then turns the generator back on. And he just thought, well, no one's going to be able to see me because we almost didn't figure out the flight path until years later. So what do you guys think?
I don't know. I definitely feel like there was something purposeful done, but again, like, I just can't imagine it was homicidal. I really can't.
Yeah, I know. The Ethiopian airline story is like kind of interesting. Like, what was he fleeing? That's my thought right now. Again, Captain Shah like really knows his job. So he would know all of these things if he had premeditated this. Like, he would know that he like had 27 hours of oxygen. He would know that he would have to turn off the, generator to lose SATCOM. Like, he knows all of these things. So
you are right. You're right. There's a theory that the plane ran out of fuel and lost power just before 8:10 a.m. and the emergency engine automatically cut on to help the pilot, like assuming there is one. Remember, there was that last handshake ping at 8:11 a.m. So every other ping had come from Australia. Like, Australia initiates a handshake and sends it to the plane. But that 8:11 ping is the only ping that originated from the plane and went to Australia. So, like, perhaps the system had shut down and then came back on. And when it came back on, the plane sends this ping to Australia, like, we're here at 8:11.
Oh, wow. That's creepy.
Yeah. Now, again, when I read all these articles and look at different theories about how the plane went down, there's a lot of discussion about whether it was a controlled or uncontrolled descent. The people who interpreted the pings claim that it tells them that the plane was in a violent nosedive, which would mean the flaperon that we talked about, you know.
I think that's such a funny name.
I know. The flaperon would have flown off the plane before it hit the ocean. And that's why when this debris washed ashore, it wasn't damaged.
It's crazy.
Yeah, but didn't we talk about also that like maybe it wasn't a violent nosedive and like hopefully everyone had just sort of passed away before they hit the ocean?
If it wasn't a violent nosedive?
Right, because the violent nosedive would make all this debris splash everywhere, right? The plane would hit the...
Unless it was going so aggressively that it's like as it went through the air, pieces of the plane flew off.
Oh,
And so they didn't have the aggressive contact with the ocean that they thought would have caused the plane to like...
splinter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's literally crazy though.
Yeah.
It's also just like my worst nightmare.
I know. I'm trying not to think too hard about it. I'm like, I will fly again.
Always have a contingency plan on an airplane, even though there's no way I'm gonna survive it if we free fall.
We know Colleen's good because she's already scoped out her allies.
I look for my people.
So that is the intentional pilot theory. And Captain Fred, again, validated that all of that makes sense and could have happened.
I mean, it does make sense.
Yeah.
I want it to have happened.
Yeah.
It's literally sociopathic. Like,
yeah, but again, that's kind of why I have a hard time believing that. I mean, as I just went over with you guys, I was like, wait, maybe this is pretty valid, but I cannot believe that this guy like lived a normal life with his wife and kids and all these coworkers who loved him. And you'd have to be such a sociopath to fool all these people and then wake up one day and just be like, I'm going to go out and take down a plane full of people. I don't know. Like, but I also know pilots often hide any kind of like health issues or mental health issues because it's pretty stringent, like to pass your physical and everything.
yeah.
And you want to keep flying, right?
I mean, he could have very easily had been struggling and putting up a front. You know what I mean? Like, all his family says, oh, he was fine. Everybody's fine. Da, da, da. But like, maybe he actually wasn't fine and kept it to himself and purposely did all this. I don't know. It's so sad, though.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like his family would certainly not want to believe that their dad is capable of killing all of these people. And I don't know if there was like any life insurance or anything associated here, but I feel like there's probably some kind of financial incentive for this to be like an accidental death instead of like a murder suicide.
But like, again, aren't sociopaths like masters at like mimicking, people's feelings and tricking people? So, I mean, if everyone says from the outside he looked normal, I think sociopaths like they excel at that. So
yeah,
I don't know. I don't think you can like miscount any of that.
No, you're right. And I think there might also, I'm not really familiar with the Malaysian culture, but I don't know if also there was some like aspect of suicide being shameful. And so maybe, again, kind of incentivizing the family and people close to him to kind of, that couldn't happen.
Yeah.
I think sometimes there's a lot of shame in suicide too, not like shame for the individual because they can't feel shame anymore, but maybe from like a family like take, like we were supposed to be this perfect family and somebody committed suicide. Maybe they're trying to cover it up or something like that. I don't know what the culture is like,
Yeah, me neither.
Like mental health in general, it's already like it's becoming more well known in America, but other cultures, I don't know.
Yeah. So an alternative theory was that there could have been some sort of sudden disruption leading to a catastrophic failure. So like if there was cargo that caught on fire, specifically these electronics in the cargo bay were being shipped from, are you ready for it?
Oh, God.
Motorola.
What? You're lying.
Shut up.
The Motorola that if you look at Star Trek, it's just doubled and flipped upside down. Shout out Michael, the Uber driver.
We haven't mentioned Michael, the Uber driver, in a couple episodes.
It all comes back to Motorola. I do not trust Motorola. I cannot.
I feel like my mom's first cell phone was a Motorola.
Yeah. But this is like kind of what I thought, that he might have been transporting something on purpose and then crashing the plane on purpose. I think.
Yeah, well, the one theory is that these were lithium batteries from Motorola that were being transported, and they could have caught on fire because there was a UPS flight in 2010 that crashed in Dubai because a pallet of lithium batteries combusted. Mm-hmm. But again, it's hard to support like that. Again, if you believe that debris we found, that the American with Russian ties found, if you believe that was real debris from the plane, because again, only a couple pieces were maybe able to be thoroughly like validated. There really weren't any burn marks. I think one piece had like 3 teeny tiny little burn marks, but you would expect like all the debris to just be incinerated, right? There was also a Swiss airline in 1988 that had an electrical fire from wiring issues, and it kind of presented in a very similar way with that sudden loss of contact. But yeah, hard to say.
Yeah. But like the satellite phone got turned back on, right? Like I feel like that can't happen if the airplane,
Yeah, like there couldn't have been combustion because like they wouldn't have made it to that 811 mark if they had set on fire.
Right. Yeah, like 7 hours prior, whatever.
Right. Yeah. I'm a no-go with the fire.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm with you. So then back to that cargo, though, the alternative theory with the cargo, which again, this is like on track with Colleen's theory.
I'm always right.
So there were 2.6 tons of electronics from Motorola.
2.6 tons.
Oh my goodness.
And it was delivered to the aircraft under escort right before takeoff.
Under escort? I'm sorry, what?
Was very clearly some important...
Wait, so they like wheeled this stuff out onto like the
tarmac?
Yeah. That's like escorted like with guards?
He definitely knew about this, the pilot. Like there's no way he wasn't aware of this on this plane.
Yeah, and apparently they did not scan any of these through security.
Oh, no way. He knew about this.
So
he knew.
Yeah, this is weird. This is making it weirder to me.
So the theory is that there was this was like problematic cargo that was going to China, and perhaps the U.S. wanted to take it down.
Of course.
Trying to prevent China from getting this technology. This theory was actually presented on the Netflix documentary, and I told you I wasn't going to go too much into the Netflix theories because I thought they were pretty out there. But it's kind of sad. There was this Frenchman, and he was working abroad, and he was going to meet his family for vacation. And so his wife and his 2 youngest kids were on the MH370, and he got off of his plane, and they like met him on the plane, and they were like, "Hey, hate to tell you that your wife and 2 kids were on that, like, are on a missing plane right now."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I can't imagine, right? And he's like, then I had to call my oldest son who was studying abroad, and he was like, my son lost it on the phone.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I cannot imagine.
Yeah. It's like, it's terrible. But I feel like he's like very focused on figuring out what happened. So he hired a lawyer because he says in France, once you file like a claim in court, they have to investigate. And he filed his complaint as like a terrorism accusation because then he gets, jumped to number 1.
Yeah.
And so he's trying to get them to investigate what really happened. But he has this writer who's on his side who presented this theory. So the Frenchman says that this anonymous source came to him and said, quote, "The Americans know full well what happened."
The
Americans. I don't know.
Because the Americans know exactly what
my friend
happened.
So they claim that there were a bunch of American AWACS in the area. And so those are the Boeing planes that have like that mushroom, like the radar mushroom, and it does surveillance, monitors everything within 600 kilometers underneath the plane. So allegedly, there were 2 of these in the area. And then the reporter goes, so I was like talking to this guy who said, AWACS have phenomenal jamming capabilities.
What does that even mean?
Like they can jam the radio of the other plane. Oh. But I found multiple sources who say that's inaccurate, that they don't have that ability. But this is a theory that was presented in the documentary. They radio and we know you've got this technology. We don't want China to have it. And you've got to land this plane. And the pilot is like, screw you, I'm not listening to you. And just kind of goes about his business. But his radio had been jammed. And so he can't radio for help or let anyone know what's going on. And they're approaching Chinese airspace. And so the Americans say, it's now or never, we've got to do something.
So it's like the idea is that the Americans hijacked the plane, but they weren't actually in the plane. They just kind of shot them down kind of situation.
Right. And, the FBI and the CIA were involved in the investigation. So
cover it.
I don't like this. I don't like this theory.
Yeah. There had to have been something weird on this plane. And he was definitely thinking to himself, I'm going to be a national hero. I'm going to die for what I believe in. And I personally think he probably depressurized or whatever the cabin because he didn't want the passengers to suffer through the crash because he knew he was definitely going to have to crash it.
Yeah, well, then that kind of goes to the theory about when he crashed, whether or not you think he was alive when the plane crashed into the ocean or not. And, like even if this was a suicide mission, he probably would have depressurized the cabin. Because like we said, that'd just be like a more peaceful way to go. But anyway, those are the pilot theories. All right.
Yeah.
You guys ready for some passenger theories?
Oh, heck yeah.
All right.
Know it.
So there are two passengers who were traveling with fake passports. So initially they thought perhaps they had hijacked this plane, but they were cleared. They were deemed to be escaping Iran and seeking asylum. They did not appear to have any nefarious motivation, so they were kind of cleared. And then there was also this flight engineer who could have had the expertise to do this because, again, they were like, who on this plane could have done it? The pilot was one, and then they were like, or this guy, this flight engineer, the only two people who would have had the knowledge to do this. But they investigated the flight engineer, and he was cleared. So, yeah.
So, like 3 suspects and cleared.
Allegedly cleared. Okay, and I actually probably should have mentioned this in the previous episode, but I got a little bombshell for you guys.
Oh,
Wait, what?
Love a bombshell.
A bombshell.
Because 4 months after this flight went missing, let's keep in mind that Malaysian Airlines had not had an accident since the 90s.
Oh, wow.
Now we have this massive loss of life and equipment. So 4 months later, Malaysian flight MH370 is shot down at the Ukraine border by surface-to-air missile.
No.
Yeah.
Russians.
It was another 777, and nearly 300 people crashed in Ukraine near the Russian border.
Oh, my gosh.
It was a flight that was coming from Amsterdam heading towards Kuala Lumpur. So the Russians said, oh, no, we didn't have anything to do with that.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
I believe that.
Mhm. Yeah, so two accidents in 4 months when you haven't had an issue in 2 decades. So, of course, the Russians denied any involvement. And then on November 17th, 2022, there was a trial in absentia in the Netherlands, and they did find 2 Russians and a Ukrainian separatist guilty of murdering all 298 people on flight MH17.
Jesus.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and Russia was in control of the separatist forces fighting in eastern Ukraine at that time. So, because like I said, these are both Boeing 777s, both Malaysian Airlines, there were some conspiracy theories that perhaps the plane that crashed in Ukraine was actually Flight 370. Kind of like your Titanic bait and switch.
Oh.
Mhm.
Oh.
They
Okay.
said that the plane that crashed in Ukraine had structural similarities to MH370. They were both 777s, but
No, I don't think that's the truth. I don't think it's the same plane.
yeah, I don't really buy this one. I think it's just pretty coincidental. They belong to the same airline and were the same plane. But the reason I think this theory kind of gained traction also is because when I showed you guys those 7 rings from the pings,
Yeah.
and
Rings from the pings.
the 7 rings from the pings, we all just assumed it went south over the ocean. But if you looked at that, there's an alternative path it could have taken, which would have been north. And again, I think we had later data like the whisper data.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, and the flaperon. I think we have other data that came out later that kind of confirms it more likely went south and went down in the ocean. But before we had all that information, when they just had those 7 rings, it could have gone north. And if it had gone north, then it would have ended up in Kazakhstan, which is a client state of Russia. And there were 3 Russians on board this flight.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and one was in first class. So there actually was also a theory that perhaps they hijacked the plane. And at the time this was happening, Russian troops had invaded Crimea, and it was like all over the news. And so one of the theories is like, did they make this plane disappear as a distraction?
Oh, yeah. Like, don't look over here. Look over there.
Right. Because we know they do that. And apparently, like, all the news about Crimea disappeared when this came out because it just like took over the news.
Yeah.
But again, then what would have happened to all those people?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of holes in that theory for me. Like, I guess they could have done it in like the same way the pilot could have, but I don't know. Seems too sus.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the expected flight path now, again, now that we have more information with
Doesn't even
the
match
whisper
it.
data and everything, doesn't really match it. But so, Kate, you thought it was Russian hijackers previously, right?
Right. That was my theory.
Do you still feel that way?
No.
Okay. What do you think now?
I think it was a murder-suicide.
Okay.
Hmm.
Well, here's what I think. I will say that now as I present this information to you, it makes me a little bit more like, maybe it was a murder-suicide. You guys might be talking me around to your
See?
theory.
Yeah.
That's right.
But as I was researching, I was like pretty invested in this theory I'll present here. I just could not get past like, it's one thing to kill yourself, another to kill 300 people.
Right.
And again, like, what is his motivation? Like, if it's political, why is there no letter? Why is there no record no evidence of like what his motivation was. But if you go off the theory that there was something put on the plane and he was like, I don't agree with this, then
right. And then he like, he circles for 22 minutes, and then the Malaysian government's like, yeah, it was a murder-suicide.
But here's my theory going into this recording. And let me defend myself before you guys roll your eyes at me. I believe that there was a hypoxic event, and this was all accidental.
Oh, okay.
Because I used to work on airplanes, and we would have to go into like these simulations. They would make it like gradually hypoxic, and you would have to do tasks and things like to see how you could do. And so you would watch other people and you would just see how sloppy they get. But then when it's your turn and you're getting sloppy, like you don't necessarily think you're being sloppy.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and there have been cases, like the most famous one was an American Trans Air flight in 1996 where the plane did not depressurize. And so, you go through your checklist and you do your tasks and it starts alarming. And the first thing you're supposed to do is like flip to the page of your checklist and you go through it. And step one is always don your oxygen.
Oh.
But in this case, there were like 4 crew members and only one of them donned their oxygen. And then they all just kept passing out. And like one would put oxygen on the other, but then person would pass out. And then the person who had the oxygen on them would then kind of come to. And anyway, so in the end, they did all regain consciousness.
It was like puff, puff, pass.
Yeah,
with oxygen.
Exactly. That's good. Exactly.
So you think.
And so in the end, they were all able to kind of like, land this plane. It was all okay. But it just goes to show how like even if you practice and practice and practice, and it's like, I mean, it should just be like memorization. This alarm goes off, you flip to your checklist, step 1, put on your oxygen. But it's so easy to get confused and become irrational if you're hypoxic. I think it seems like they really that U-turn and the loss of contact happened pretty close after they reached their cruising altitude. So my theory was maybe they just forgot to pressurize the plane, and so it was just like this gradual hypoxia, and that's why his radio transmissions were incorrect
Because he's confused.
Yeah, but then maybe there was. So maybe something happened, or maybe there was a kind of a rapid depressurization or something. And so he tries to do this U-turn to get back because he wants to, go back and land. But now he's like so hypoxic, he's getting sloppy, he can't land.
Oh, yeah.
And then, I don't know, maybe he intentionally or unintentionally set the cruise control.
And then just
but that doesn't explain the 22-minute holding pattern that they think happened. Like,
I know.
Just circled.
Kate, you love to hear this. You are right. I can't really explain the holding pattern. One of the engines would have had to have failed before the other. That would make you kind of like, free fall, spiral like that. But Captain Fred said that if the plane was functioning as it's supposed to, that wouldn't happen. That you have multiple fuel tanks and they, fuel both engines. And so when the engines failed, they should fail at the same time. But if there was some kind of issue with the plane where it didn't work like it was supposed to, I guess that could cause the free fall. You are 100% correct. I cannot explain that.
But it is an interesting theory. I do like it. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know too. I haven't really looked into this, but I wonder if there's some way also where they could have passed out and leaned over and like forced the throttle to one side, and that's what's causing.
Yeah. I was thinking that at some point, like he, dies and his arm just kind of slips.
Yeah,
and it just circles.
But I did not run that theory by Captain Fred, so I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then there was this theory that perhaps it wasn't Shah but Fariq. Like maybe Shah,
the co-pilot.
Yeah, like this is all accidental. So maybe Shah is like, you know what? We finished our communications for the moment. We're at our cruising altitude, which again, as I explained last week, is apparently like, that's the easy part of the flight. You just set your cruise control and sit back and relax until it's time to land. And so maybe he decides like, now's a good chance for me to go to the bathroom. So he gets up, he goes to the bathroom, and then some kind of emergency happened, this rapid decompression or something. And he couldn't get into the cockpit because again, there's like that 30-second, wait to get back in.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's in the bathroom and it's like, do I put this yellow mask on or do I just like go for it and try to get back into the cockpit so I can be a hero? And so maybe, he wasn't able to get back into the cockpit. And now this guy who's got 39 flight hours in this plane
has no idea what to do.
Yeah, he's like got to handle this emergency.
Yeah, that sounds pretty realistic. But also like there's something up with those lithium batteries.
Yeah, I do not trust it. There's just something very weird about it. And like, even if it wasn't lithium batteries or if it was something else, that, like, why didn't they get checked by security? I don't
Right.
know.
And why were they escorted onto the plane?
It doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense.
Well, coming into this, I was adamant that it was accidental and that this is what happened. But I do like this theory that you guys are presenting. And I, kind of from a non-academic perspective, I just really appreciate that in your theory, there's no bad guys either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just like a tragic accident.
Yeah, and I
Feels
feel
so
like
sad.
it's just much easier for me to comprehend that this guy that appears so nice when you see him on YouTube and you hear his family and friends talk about him, that like he was trying to be a hero, than that this guy just took down a plane of almost 300 people, all
Right.
because he was lonely?
Right.
I don't know. Find it hard to believe. There was also another flight that was more recent in 2005. It was a Cyprus airline that was on a flight to Athens, and they failed to pressurize the aircraft to take off. So that's kind of like the theory that I presented. And they didn't recognize it either. So I think by the time the alarms go off, they've pretty much already like are starved of oxygen,
Mm-hmm.
and they're already like losing consciousness and falling asleep. And then that plane continued to fly for over 2 hours, and then it eventually crashed into a mountain range. So again, I can believe that this happened. I believe that is a possible cause, but I'm having a hard time accounting for those 22 minutes. And again, I think that hypoxia makes sense. And then that aggressive U-turn makes sense if it's like, we've got to go back.
Right, right. But, like, to have the time to turn around and to not radio anybody, I don't know.
Unless they were confused. Also,
That's
remember
true.
that other plane did get a transmission on the emergency frequency, but couldn't make out what was being said.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
I'm still pretty adamant that he knew what he was carrying on this plane, and he turned it around at that exact spot where he knew it was, like, the quote, no man's land. And because he knew that would be the perfect spot to lose communication, because, I don't know, that's just, I feel like there's too many plot points that make sense for that.
Yeah. And like, what about the 27 hours of oxygen in the cockpit?
Well, yeah, he would have had to have not donned his oxygen. Like, it would have had to have been that he was too confused or too
Yeah.
slow.
Oh, yeah. He didn't have anyone to tell him to puff, pass.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think an expert should have run his checklist. But
Mhm.
again, if he was having some mild hypoxia while he was ascending, maybe confused.
Yeah.
I really also just want to give him the benefit of the doubt, because it's just nicer to believe that this devastating loss of life was like not malicious, you know?
Yeah. I mean, like, continuing with my theory, I think if he did do it, it was done nobly. Like, he thought to himself, I cannot in good faith give this to the Chinese government or whatever. Like, he clearly was a politically involved man. So I'm sure he knew of conflicts in the world and knew better than that. And he very could have easily refused to have flown. You know what I mean? Like, could have refused at the gate. I'm sure there was a lot of pressure in getting that material escorted onto the plane. I'm not sure, but
So do you think he knew before he took off what he had on the plane?
oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think so.
So you think he devised this plane before he took off?
Well, I feel like it might have been like a contingency. Like he probably, well, to me, it makes, if you like follow the flight pattern, maybe he's like trying to figure out what to do the whole time.
Yeah. I mean, like, it was probably like, you have to do this. And yeah, he probably looked normal in the CCTV security footage or whatever. But maybe he found out while he was on the plane, like, that maybe that's why he didn't look super freaked out in the security footage.
Yeah, I guess like you said,
But-
like right before
Yeah.
takeoff.
Yeah.
I think he's, in the end, I think he's noble.
Yeah. I think it's probably like he's in the air and he's like, I cannot give this to, whatever government was going to get this. And so he had to think of the most noble thing. And he came up with what he came
Yeah.
up with.
And he was like, I'm going to turn this plane around. I'm not going to let this cargo get anywhere where it's not supposed to be. I'm going to oppose the government, which I don't really know anything about the Malaysian government. I don't know what kind of like conflict they have, what kind of relations they have with China or anything, but
Yeah, I don't either. Google told me that there is some corruption in Malaysia, but again, I feel really uneducated about it, so I can't really comment on that.
yeah. And I just believe, like, in the end, he did the most humane thing to those people and the most, I don't know, like cutting off the oxygen and making them go to sleep. Like, I feel like he did things in a certain order to make it so it was the least horrific accident for them.
Yeah. He did have a couple of friends. I mean, I told you we had a couple of friends who threw him under the bus because they were like, yeah, he was banging the flight attendants.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's not a very good friend.
No.
No.
But he also had, these friends said, I do think that when more information comes out, like they're like, I can't explain what happened, but I think when we get more information, we're gonna find out that like he was a hero.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I would hope so, because the YouTube videos that he would post and things like that, he was just like so sweet and cute. I mean, there's like no way this man was corrupt.
He was a precious little man.
From the 3 seconds of him being like, here's my YouTube video.
He was like, hey guys, here's my YouTube video for community service. Like, it's so cute.
Okay, so Colleen and Kate, you guys both think it was like a heroic, noble thing.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
But like, what about you, Megan? Do you still thinking in your hypoxia at this point?
I don't know, you guys. I was pretty firm on this hypoxia. The 22 minutes really throws everything off unless someone can tell us that, like, you know, he passed out or died or was somehow incapacitated and just like forced the throttle in a certain direction. That's why the plane was circling.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah.
I'll have to run that by Captain Fred. If we have any other pilots out there listening, please feel free to let us know. I really didn't research that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, the 22 minutes definitely throws everything off. And I guess I was thinking if he really was trying to figure out how to handle this, maybe, I don't know, something just got sprung on him.
Yeah, I guess that also kind of makes sense with like the wandering, like Kate was saying, that he's just like trying to figure out what to do. And again, that he passed by the island that he was born at and grew up on for like one last view, knowing that like this wasn't going to end well.
Yeah, I feel like maybe he was like, you know, what do I do now? And he's like flying around, and like maybe, you know, I think earlier we talked about like him actually like cutting off the oxygen to the passengers so that they would like not know what he was doing. So maybe he like mercifully sort of let them get hypoxic, fall asleep, and then he's just in the cockpit, like,
You know,
Yeah, I think it's a peaceful way to go if you have to go. Like, just
Yeah.
all giddy, you know, little sleepy.
he definitely would have cut their oxygen sooner than later. Like, I mean, we'll never know, but
Also, though, with this whole theory that like he cut the oxygen off to everybody, can you imagine? It's kind of like Michael Collins being behind the moon without any radio access to the world and like by himself, and how lonely that was.
oh, scary.
Can you imagine being the only living soul on a plane with like 300 people back there that are just like dead?
oh yeah, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
And also, like, maybe he's like, I just killed these 300 people, and now I have to just go back. Like, I know that I am flying to my certain death, so let me just go past these. Like you said, let me just go past these islands that I was born at, take one more look at them, and I don't know. I feel like the 22 minutes of circling is him, like, you know, sticking it to the Malaysian government. Like, whatever you put on this plane, it's not getting to its destination.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
And like, it's on your hands, Malaysian government. Like, maybe he was like really sticking it to him.
Yeah.
yeah. So sad. So dark.
It is. It's really sad.
Sorry, guys. This was a pretty heavy episode. Not a ton of giggling. But yeah, intriguing, right?
It was super intriguing.
So what's our poll going to be, Kate?
Okay. I don't even know where to start. Okay, let me think. Maybe we do like hypoxia, like Megan, you know, we do a malicious murder suicide where this was all premeditated and he sort of had this idea when he got on this plane. Or you could do this like sort of heroic murder suicide where there was something on the plane and he had to do the noble thing, which is also the terrible noble thing, you know. Or hijackers, like the Russian hijackers or American hijackers.
I mean,
Yeah, I guess there's like 4 categories.
Yeah. Or if you guys have any other categories.
We'll do another category.
Yeah, write into us if you have a theory. I mean, this is like, you could theorize forever on this.
If really.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. That's it for this week, guys. Thanks for sticking with us for 2 weeks.
Woo!
Colleen's on the social media. She's going to post a lot of photos for you guys. I think, again, when you see the photos, it just makes the whole thing like more confusing. Again, just like looking at the flight path and
Yeah, it's very weird.
all of the data. Definitely lots of sources in the show notes. So check out that online. Shop our Amazon affiliate links. Get some merch.
Just scroll on down to the bottom of wherever you have listened to this podcast and hit that 5-star button, or leave us some comments, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we'll see you next Tuesday.
Bye, guys.
Tuesday.